Okay, can you hear me? I guess so. Okay, let's get to work. First, let me show you my signs here. So you can see them both. I actually use these signs at protests. We've got honk to secede from, it used to say Bush. Now it says Obama. I've got this one I use a lot. It is the right of the people to alter or abolish government. From the Declaration of Independence, of course. And this one I use from time to time when it's relevant. U.S. out of North America. Okay. All right, I've actually written this out, but I will be extemporaneous as well. Okay. So this is about a 15-minute talk, after which I'll answer questions or comments from the chat. And I won't be looking too much meanwhile. Okay, this talk is a general overview of libertarian decentralism and secession strategies. Mostly my synthesis of the ideas of many great libertarians, decentralists, nonviolence, and other theorists, and activists. This is really annoying. Let me turn the sound down. That's a good idea. Yeah, alright, where are we? Okay. Okay, I'm going to discuss libertarian decentralist philosophy and strategy based on my writings at secession.net, as updated on the Vermont Commons blog that they let me do. I do once a month or so, and which I updated quite a bit in this presentation. And actually I was embarrassed about a lot of the things on secession.net. And in fact, secession.net will be reorganized a lot as this presentation is organized right now. So if you want to wait a week before you tell all your friends, go ahead. So first of all, I have been a libertarian for more than 30 years, starting out in New York City and hanging out with Murray Rothbard and other troublemakers from around 1979 to 82. Then I moved to Los Angeles and lived there for 5 years, hung out with libertarians all the time. And I've been in D.C. for 23 years, belly of the beast, and know lots of libertarians here, though they do tend to come and go a lot more in D.C. People tend to be a lot more transient. And then over these years I've also organized some Peace, Green, and Libertarian Party, Peace and Green groups in these states. In the 1980s I published the newsletter Decentralize. It had about 300 subscribers, which is pretty good in those days. And for 11 years I've had secession.net, though I haven't done much to do with it, done much with it. And then for the last couple of years I've done a blog at Vermont Commons, which is part of the Vermont secession movement. And by the way, the wrong link is on the schedule here. The correct one is at secession.net. And I list some of the better articles you might want to read. Now I can see the secession is finally really catching on, I should say, among both left and right-wing activists, so I'm starting to get more active on the issue myself again. Now, libertarian decentralism, you'll say, what is that? I've never heard about it, or it's not really a philosophy, or whatever. Well, for minarchists who want to retain the nation-state, libertarian decentralism is basically a strategy. these type of minarchists hope or assume that the United States government would survive in a libertarian society. Others aren't that optimistic, even though they'd like to see it happen. But libertarian decentralism is also a philosophy for both minarchists and anarchists who believe large nation states are inherently tyrannical, and that in a free society, without the threat of military action against secessionists, large states would just break up into smaller entities. Some would be anarchists, some would be minarchists, and some would be far too statist for any of us, and we'd have to work on them. I believe that most libertarians are libertarian decentralists and don't even know it. So I get very frustrated with fights between anarchists and minarchists because they're so stupid. In fact, during a 1998 LP convention, I did a survey, and I had a little pink survey sheet of about 100 libertarians, and by the time they filled it out, 75% of them turned out to be libertarian decentralists. They weren't anarchists, they weren't minarchists. They wanted to get rid of the big nation states. Some wanted anarchism in their communities, some wanted minarchism. So my topic today is the philosophy, really, of a libertarian decentralism and how to implement it, especially through its most dramatic strategy, which is secession. Whew! Get myself tired out here already. All right, now just to do some name dropping, I'm way behind. I edit Wikipedia, and I have this article on libertarian decentralism I haven't quite put together yet because I want to have all my references down so it doesn't get deleted or gutted or whatever. But both pro-property and left-wing libertarians have identified themselves as libertarian decentralists, and that includes Karl Hess, Kirkpatrick Sale, Bill Kaufman, John McLaughlin, E.F. Schumacher, Leopold Kohr, and Murray Bookchin. And Bookchin calls his alternative libertarian municipalism, which I think is a nice little phrase. People who have been described as libertarian decentralists by other people include Thomas Jefferson, Frederick Hayek, Murray Rothbard in his 1960s period, Dorothy Day, Felix Morley, Henry George, Ron Paul, Leon Lowe, and Francis Kendall. The International Society for Individual Liberty promotes libertarian decentralism as a philosophy. People who have written seriously about either the strategy or the philosophy include J.H. Hubert, Gene Healy, Anthony Gregory, Charles Johnson, Roderick Long, Lou Rockwell, Jeffrey Tucker, Thomas Woods, and me. Epistemologically, I take the scientific and practical approach. What moral or utilitarian theories work best in achieving liberty? Thomas Jefferson, original author of the Declaration of Independence, often declared that the U.S. government was a political experiment. In 1987, he wrote, "I have not any doubt that the result of our experiment will be that men are capable of governing themselves without a master." In 1796, he wrote, "This, I hope, will be the age of experiments in government, and that their basis will be founded in the principles of honesty, not of mere force." And we need another age like that right now. Because we can see after 222 years, we have clearly seen that the U.S. government experiment has failed. Its representative and majority rule political processes at the local, state, and federal levels only facilitate de facto minority rule by special interests and elites who are wealthy enough or organized enough to elect representatives to support laws that benefit them and hurt everyone else. We really have rule by the special interests and for the special interests. Okay. These are corporate, military-industrial, professional, union, government, bureaucrat, and even foreign government lobbyists who have a stranglehold on our political processes, who suppress our rights, steal elections, loot taxpayers, destroy economies, promote terrorism, foment war, and inevitably will lead us to that big nuclear war I've been worrying about since I was 10 years old. All those Arabs right now who are fighting and dying to have a representative majority rule government, which is pretty sad, since we already know it doesn't work. So it'd be nice if they could jump right to the political decentralist alternative, but we'll see. We have a little more time. Okay, now let's just talk about radical political decentralization as the libertarian alternative. And just for people who have signed in, I'm going to give you a little Facebooky thing here. Okay, there's what I'm talking about in case you want to catch up. Alright. Radical political decentralization is the libertarian alternative. Political decentralism, libertarian decentralism is the real libertarianism. Now, there's something controversial for you to fight about. Okay, the concept of individual liberty is simple. Individuals should be free to do whatever they please as long as they don't harm others by using force or fraud. This is the basic ethic technical or golden rule of all religions, and one which of course has been corrupted by theologians and political authorities. Individual consent, not some nationalist, racial, religious, tribal, or ideological construct or social contract, is the only legitimate basis of any social, economic, and political organization. However, supporting the idea and value of individual liberty is not enough to obtain liberty. In other words, we can't say people will just want less government and we'll have less government. That's not going to work. We can't do it through the current system because, again, experience has shown it's corruptible. It got corrupted. You can't say, let's go back to the original Constitution. We go back to the original Constitution, we'll be okay. It's inherently corrupt through the majority rule and the representative democracy, not to mention the Supreme Court that lets them do whatever they want because they're all a bunch of statists. Okay, now throughout history, you have to realize most individuals have chosen to live in community with others. There aren't too many real radical individualists out there, even among libertarians. And we can't ignore that fact. Large multinational nation states were created by military conquest of all these smaller independent communities, tribes, and nations. Individuals today, even in this country, have very little control over their local communities. Most of them have become mere administrative units of large, distant, oppressive nation states. The alternative, the libertarian decentralist alternative, is tens of thousands of independent, autonomous communities worldwide. They can be geographical communities or non-geographical communities or a combination of both. They can be panarchistic, which emphasizes each individual's right to freely join and leave the jurisdiction of any government they choose without having to move from their current locale. You know, how these things will work will have to be worked out, of course. But I won't detail all the possibilities because you just have to use your imagination. It's an experiment. We'll see what works. Not everything's going to work. Your favorite anarchist dream, after 2 months, you may decide it's hokey. I mean, this doesn't work. But whatever these communities, however they structure themselves, and they work, to survive as free communities, they really do have to structure themselves and follow certain libertarian, decentralist political processes. And I'll describe those later on. So once you have your communities, they are going to end up networking or loosely confederating regionally, continentally, and even worldwide in different networks, different confederations, depending on the common issues they have to deal with. Criminal justice, self-defense, water pollution, mutual aid, etc. And these will be overlapping networks and even confederations. But once again, it'll be worked out. It's an experiment. We'll have to see how it works. The most important thing is that communities must be free to join or secede from such networks and confederations. Only the right to secession, the continual right to secession, which is Jefferson's version of which is my version of Jefferson's revolution every 20 years. Only the right to secession guarantees true autonomy. Many worry, and rightly, that corporations would run roughshod over such communities. But without central government privileges, limited liability, corporate welfare, and competition stifling laws and regulations, most existing huge multinational corporations would break up into much smaller entities that would have little real power to control communities. But people in communities do have to be careful not to get tricked by corporations or other entities, and especially those that want to put you into debt slavery. When lured into debt slavery, the only solution is to default. As someone once said, if I owe you $1,000, it's my problem. If I owe you $10,000, it's your problem. So, if people would stop loaning other people who can't afford it all that money, we'd be in a lot less trouble economically right now. Now we'll talk about the libertarian decentralist political processes, which of course you're all very interested in. Communities may create whatever economic, social, or cultural systems they want. However, to prevent communities from recreating warring nation-states or abusing individual rights and liberties, they have to follow 6 principles of political process, which are both libertarian and decentralist. First is, number 1, Bill of Rights. Any community may fall victim to prejudice, intolerance, exploitation, suspicion, or hysteria towards one or more of its members. Therefore, it is necessary to have a written guarantee of freedom of association and of movement in and out of the community, equal political rights of members to participate in community decision-making, or to access community-related information, and procedural rights, right to trial and due process, right to counsel, right of appeal, no cruel and unusual means of interrogation or punishment. Look at the signs for a second. I have to get something. Intermission time. Look at those beautiful signs. You too can make signs like that and go to protests. Okay, we're on libertarian decentralist political processes. Number 2, polycentric law. Over the last few centuries, legislatively decreed law, or fiat law, made by and for elites, has restricted individual liberty worldwide. Not to mention all the systems that still have kings and fiefdoms of one kind or another. Fiat law has supplanted more naturally and freely evolved common law, private commercial law, and laws of voluntary associations. Because these laws come from many centers of activity and interest, they can be called polycentric law. Individuals and communities must be free to choose their own legal system. And they can utilize against these principles of panarchism with different individuals, even within a community, choosing different laws. Depending on how, once again, it's an experiment. In fact, I have a whole chart, which I have to put up one of these days, that gives you all the options. You know, there's the top and the bottom, and you put it together, and you find out what you end up with. Next, number 3 is consensus-oriented or supermajority democracy. Contracts and consensus democracy are both examples of consensus-oriented decision-making where decisions, including to restrict liberty, are not made until all affected parties agree. Now, democracy means rule of the people, and even those who attempt to form communities only through contract usually will encounter unexpected situations which require some sort of democratic decision-making. If you can work in something that works purely by contract, great, you know. But I'm assuming that at some point you'll have problems. Supermajority decision-making means at least 2/3, 3/4, 9/10 or more of everyone eligible to vote must agree to the decision. These processes contribute to community harmony because members propose and adopt only rules and policies that enjoy overwhelming support by all members. It's hard for the special interests to get their little laws passed. Now, if that's not libertarianism, what is? Direct democracy. Representative democracy, even in groups of a few dozen people, too often results in rule by cliques or elites, usually for their own benefit, or what they think is good for you. And anybody who's ever been in a small libertarian party, organization, or a peace group, a small peace group, knows that's true. Direct democracy means only the votes of individual members can approve or reject laws, rules, regulations, and taxes, fees, contributions, whatever each community decides to call these things. Direct democracy discourages elites from even suggesting special interest laws or taxes. Voters may still elect or appoint or hire administrators and managers, but their policy-making ability would have to be strictly limited. And, from my experience with Robert's Rules groups versus direct democracy groups, I mean, they have their issues, their problems, but there's less infighting. Sometimes things are a little more disorganized. Sometimes there are unacknowledged cliques running things. But it's much easier, I find, to break up the clique and to go to the whole body and say, let's do this. In fact, that's why a lot of lefties in the peace groups would get mad at me, because I'd come up with these good ideas and they knew I was a libertarian. And it would get them mad that people would like my ideas and go out and do that protest I came up with. Okay, sunset provisions. We're up to number 5 of libertarian processes. Now, even libertarians can be tricked or panicked into creating rules and regulations to deal with one-time or emergency situations. Therefore, it is necessary to include a provision allowing a minority of members, say 15 to 25%, to vote to rescind rules or fees after a short period of time. And all rules and fees should have sunset provisions so that they are phased out after a certain period of time, unless explicitly reinstated by voters. There also should be explicit what I call fair exit provisions, ensuring individuals disagreeing with some new rule or policy or tax are given sufficient time to settle affairs, get a fair price for their property or business, and leave the community. Number 5 is nonviolent institutions. Philosophies of nonviolence, like libertarianism, hold that no belief or goal excuses the use of individual or state violence to force the compliance of others. And note that even Gandhi believed in violent self-defense when there was no other way. Nonviolent practices extend to interpersonal, group, and community conflict resolution. Nonviolent conflict resolution within and between communities, and even nonviolent policing, peacekeeping, and defense have all proved workable in many places at many times. A commitment to nonviolent conflict resolution helps create tolerance among people, despite their ethnic, racial, religious, ideological, and other differences. We must extend nonviolent principles worldwide if humanity is to survive and prosper, in my opinion. Now, this may take a few decades because there are a lot of people who believe in violence, want to be violent, are very psychologically disturbed and can't help being violent. So, we'll always need self-defense, let's put it that way. You never know when somebody's bitten by a rabid dog and goes crazy. Now, variations on these 6 principles I've mentioned above, the processes, would also be followed in the various networks and confederations of communities that the communities would choose to form or join. While these bodies might have some forms of representation, the important decisions still would have to be referred back to community members. But of course, we will always have to be eternally vigilant that bureaucrats and apparatchiks don't use the emergency, to accrue power to themselves. The price of liberty remains eternal vigilance. Finally, we're getting to libertarian decentralist strategies, how we're going to get to this place that I've been describing. How we're going to have the freedom to create our experiments and see what communities work best for us. And how we can work with all the other communities which may be very different on issues that are of importance to each other, especially things like pollution, criminal justice, water. I have what I call 9 strategic principles. And when I get to the last one, we're done. And we can start having a discussion. Meanwhile, if you just joined, here I have a short description of my talk there. You can see that. And here are my beautiful signs. Honks to secede. U.S. out of North America. It is the right of the people to alter or abolish government. As long as we're talking about strategy, you have to keep getting that word out. The number one thing is persistence. You just have to keep going with a smile. I've gone into many groups where people thought I was nuts talking about decentralism and secession, and after a couple of years they thought, well, you know, that's not such a bad idea. And that's when secession wasn't even popular. So nowadays I'm sure it's going to be even easier, especially once the economy collapses, the inflation takes off. It's not like we're living in peaceful, calm, and prosperous times. I'm sure things are going to get worse. So, here are my 9 strategic principles. Number 1, emphasize radical political decentralization and the right to secession. This is so that you're not co-opted by reformist promises to decentralize power. We'll decentralize power from the top down. Movements advocating anything short of the right to secession, advocating any form of top-down decentralization or devolution, are too easily ignored or co-opted, especially co-opted. What we're really engaged in is community-based secession, not federal state-based secession. In other words, not Florida, not Texas, etc. You can work with Texas secessionist groups. You can work with Vermont secessionist groups, but you're doing it in order to continue to promote the idea that the individual forms the communities form the networks and the confederations. Some of them may end up to be the Confederation of Communities of Vermont. Fine, whatever people want. But state-based, current state-based secession has a lot of problems, and very often it is being promoted by people who basically want to be the little king, the big fish in that state. So you have to watch out for that thing. But if you go to some of the state secession groups, you'll see that. But some of these people eventually might be, you get these charismatic types who take over, and then you have your little Führer in your own state, your own seceded state, and that's not libertarianism. Number 2, nonviolence. We have to use a diversity of nonviolent strategies and tactics to withdraw consent from and secede from the state. The purpose of nonviolent action is to withdraw consent from government or other authorities, rather than to wrest power from them. Political violence easily destroys public sympathy and unites the people, the elites and the police, against the protesters. That's why governments infiltrate demonstrations with violent agent provocateurs to make us look bad. And violent action often is promoted and practiced by individuals who become as ruthless towards other dissidents, and don't get me started on the Black Bloc, as they do towards the oppressor, especially after they win the revolution. And I know some quote-unquote libertarians who have no problem with threatening violence. Well, don't get me started. All right. Nonviolence heightens the moral superiority of the actionists and makes the government look bad if it attacks them. Police and soldiers wooed with sound political arguments and nonviolent demonstrations are more likely to come over to the side of the activists the ones afraid of being harmed by protesters. And I think we've seen this to a certain extent, most recently in the Arab world. So, of course, when you have a crazy like Gaddafi who's just going to kill everybody, but we get into that more later. So I really think we have to marginalize those violent street fighters, people who want to talk about getting their militia together and getting out there and defending their territory. They want the government to bring it on, and we don't need that. I mean, they can go. Well, they give the whole secession movement a bad name, and you may remember the Texas secession movement in the '90s. I don't know, they kidnapped people and everything. I mean, they're crazy. They're still in prison too. Luckily, most people have forgotten about it, but it's easy enough for the government to bring it back up again if they want to. So what if they do start shooting us in the streets or in our homes? We have to expect a few martyrs along the way. This can happen. But most governments, after a couple incidents, will stop. Now, if they don't stop, if you have flagrant mass murder like Hitler and Stalin and Pol Pot and Gaddafi, or the Israeli Defense Forces, but don't get me started, can you morally start engaging in violent self-defense? That's when you can. But if we're smart, in most countries in the world, 95%, it'll never come to that. If we keep the violent crazies down so that it's really, in the 70s and the 80s, it was only, we were convinced it was only the government provocateurs who were promoting violence, especially in the peace movement, in the 90s, until this black bloc nonsense started around 2000. Okay, where are we here? Number 3, promote tolerance and discourage sectarianism. Well, this is going longer than I thought it was going to. Promote tolerance and discourage sectarianism. So that people from every racial, ethnic, religious, cultural, economic, sexual grouping or orientation can find a common bond of trust. Even long-time adversarial groups, which seek to separate into homogeneous communities, must maintain mutual tolerance, as well as tolerance towards members of the groups who may choose to leave and live in integrated communities. And this will help provide solidarity as we attempt to free ourselves from the statist elites. More specifically, and this is a big issue with me, is the pro-property libertarians, are mostly, I assume, listening today. They have to learn to tolerate left libertarian decentralists, libertarian socialists, left anarchists, anarchist syndicalists, anarcho-capitalists. Oh, we tolerate them, I forgot. Take that out. Green anarchists, bioregionalists, etc. There are millions of them worldwide. Or at least they keep saying so when I argue with them on Wikipedia. And, they don't want to live under what they consider to be a capitalist system, though probably most of them would put up with or be happy with a free market system once they understood what it was. I think the main point is that those who can work with both left and right will be more effective in leading a libertarian decentralist revolution. And people who can't get along can still do their own things and be part of the network. Whatever works. I'm a pragmatist. But keeping things cool, keeping the negativity down is very helpful. And that's what provocateurs do. They try to make things more negative, more hostile. We'll talk about that a little bit more about that later. We're up to number 4 of 9 here. Need more leadership by the disenfranchised. Now, we must actively recruit and accept the voices and leadership by the disenfranchised, which means especially women and people of color, who make up about 90% of the world's population. Women do tend to want more cooperative, less violent political systems, ones that aren't so complicated and competitive, so that they effectively shut them out because they're so busy taking care of the kids and taking care of the grandmother and doing this and doing that and having a job. That's what I like about the free market, is that everybody will be able to work part-time and have more time for their lives, basically. Where am I? People of color in this nation and around the world are fed up with imperialist dominance by white people. Radical decentralist movements will get nowhere if women and people of color are not in the forefront. You can see more about this in my article, Woman versus the Nation State, and my articles at Vermont Commons blog, which are linked at SecessionNet. And I can see some of them need some updating too, so don't be too harsh on me if you disagree here. Feel free to send me comments, email me comments. I'm always working to finesse things. Number 5, work within the system while creating alternatives to it. We have to promote decentralist alternatives and strategies through education, lobbying, political parties and candidates, and secessionist referendums, secessionist constitutional amendments. And the organizations and networks of organizations doing this also can help create community-based organizations, which will be the basis of secessionist organizations, the eventual communities that will be formed, as well as creating networks and confederations that will become the basis of the political structure. It'll all happen fairly organically, I think. Spontaneous order. Number 6, respect the rights of non-secessionists. Obviously, secessionists do not intend to wait for a supermajority of people in their communities or regions or states to join them in becoming secessionists. Once we attain that critical mass of 15 or 20%, and other conditions make it necessary, inevitable, like, hyperinflation, small nuclear war, whatever, secession will start to happen. So we must reassure the public, the communities, and their new confederations will not be driving off unwanted people and confiscating their property. We must assure them that if they want to retain their citizenship in the nation-state, obey its laws, and pay its taxes, they may do so, even if many or most of their neighbors secede. That's just sticking to good panarchism principles. Number 7, we have to prepare for alternate scenarios. There are 3 different types of scenarios. One is the gradual reformist, relatively slow change, maybe punctuated by spurts of quick, change. Continual crisis scenarios where things just keep getting worse and worse, which is where we are now, economically, politically, militarily. And there is constant revolutionary fervor. And then, of course, there are the catastrophe scenarios. And those are complete economic and political chaos, regional and even nuclear war, earthquakes, tidal waves, volcanoes, big meteor strikes. Regular disaster movie. So I would like to think we can change things where we're still in the continual crisis scenarios, but unfortunately I think we'll probably end up having to wait for the catastrophe. But if we're ready for the catastrophe, if we're the ones who are organized, as opposed to the Marxists and the Leninists and the Stalinists, the Workers' World Party, and the Communist Party USA, the groups that basically run the big peace rallies. Don't get me started. Okay, we're down to number 8 here. Almost done. We have to watch out for central government co-optation and leadership sellout. Throughout the world, there are many groups that talk secession largely to gain greater autonomy and local control from the large state. And, that's fine if that's what they want to do. But there are also individuals and leaders willing to sell out even a big secessionist movement. Some individuals may enter the movement with just that intent, using secessionists to gain their own goals, be it power in a small organization, notoriety, the hope of starting, their own little pedophile community, or serving the government that pays them to disrupt or co-opt us. So once again, those government provocateurs have to be we have to keep our eyes open. On the other hand, let's not start accusing everybody of it. It's usually the violent people or the people who steal the mailing list. Most of the other people are usually just crazy. Or insensitive. They need sensitivity training. You need a good nonviolent conflict resolution meeting, or anger management class, or something like that. Finally, we're at the end here. Don't let the Unionists get you down. And they do try. As both right and left-wing secessionists have found out, right-wing and left-wing statists will attack you, and often unmercifully. Right-wingers will call you traitors, isolationists, pacifists, anarchists, crazies, wingnuts, and there's probably a few things down here on the Facebook listing that you can see too. I haven't looked at it. Left-wingers usually go straight for racists and anti-Semites. They'll claim you want a new confederacy and the reinstitution of slavery. I swear to God they do. Say that. And even worse, they'll claim you want to destroy the state of Israel. And I do have how a nonviolent confederation would work in the state of Israel, because it's so controversial. I do have that linked from secession.net, including a couple different confederation plans that have come up from Jews and Arabs in that area. So, anyway, where was I? And that's just if you say the word secession. Now, these people are heavily into innuendo and guilt by association. So if you dare to mention in a neutral fashion, give the benefit of the doubt to, or associate with anyone who themselves has had any minor connection, tenuous association with any groups that happen to include a few bigots, you'll be attacked as a bigot. Ron Paul, Lou Rockwell and his website, Thomas DiLorenzo, Kirkpatrick Gassell, Justin Romando, anti-Israel lobbyists, and Palestinian anti-Israel lobby activists, I should say. That's what I would say. And Palestinian independence activists are all in the category of people who, you associate with them, oh boy, a chance to yell bigotry. On the other hand, you do have to realize there are real racists attracted to the secession movement because they want to promote segregation of racism and religions and other groupings, and I have run into some of them. So you have to be careful, for example, people talking about national anarchism or racial self-determination. And they'll deny up and down, oh, we aren't we're racialists. So you have to watch out for those type 2, because then you will get in trouble. I also advise people not to spend a lot of time defending states' rights arguments, and especially from the Civil War. Don't let yourself be dragged into defenses of what happened 100 and whatever many years ago, 50 years ago. It's really irrelevant to radical political decentralization, which is about individual rights and communities, and not about states' rights. But it is still okay to say that Lincoln was a statist centralist. All right, we're down to the last paragraph here. Once Unionists and the government find out bad-mouthing you doesn't drive you away from secessionist activism, they may try to pick us off one by one, finding out whatever minor or bogus law, regulation, tax we have been disobeying or refusing to pay. And of course, they will try to entrap people into illegal and violent activity. If somebody comes up to you and says, "You know where I can get a joint?" don't say anything. They're probably a cop, unless you know them really well, and even then. And of course, if they say, "Let's start a militia, let's blow something up," then you know. I mean, they're crazy or they're a fed. But because they will start picking off, it's another reason that we need solidarity, we need cooperative relationships, friendly relationships with lots of people, because we need somebody to come and pay our bail, to protest, to get, it's better to have 100 people out there protesting than 1 or 2, and to publicize the injustice, to get it in the newspaper, spread the word, and of course, if you do get incarcerated, to write you in the big house, send you a few bucks here and there so you can buy toothpaste, that sort of thing. Of course, when they really start coming after us like this, that's when we know we are winning. So unless you really provoke them, prosecution is the least of your worry, but we're still in the early bad-mouthing from right-wingers and left-wingers phase. And, ignore it, let it bounce off your back, and really look at what we're trying to create. We are trying to create a new world, just like in the Age of Reason. Thomas Jefferson, they were trying to create a new experiment. And that's what we are doing now, is a new experiment. Okay, so that's it. I'm going to take a quick look at the Facebook. Let's see here. Okay, where are we? Alright, I'm working my way out from the bottom. Breakdown of Nations. Is that my music? I have a music song, Breakdown of Nations. Carol Moore, YouTube Carol Moore Songs has a bunch of my anarchist songs. Radical decentralist, libertarian decentralist songs. Not readable, whatever that means. There's me. Let 1,000 nations bloom. Let 10,000 nations bloom. That's a song I haven't put up yet. Generation of 10,000 nations, and none of them at war. Lovely Signs Carol. Oh, let's look at the signs again for anybody who came in late. These are different signs I've brought to different protests, peace protests, or wherever they seemed appropriate. Honk to secede from Bush, but now it's Obama. It's right of the people to alter or abolish government. I bring that to a lot of them. It's very popular, even among the left-wingers. U.S. out of North America, I don't bring that quite as much more, because the right to alter or abolish government is the most popular one. I can bring that just about every place, and I have. Okay, let's see. Am I in the Second Vermont Republic? Well, not technically, no. I'm this, because I don't live in Vermont, but I do blog for Vermont Commons, which is part of the Second Vermont Republic. But obviously, we are not responsible for everything everybody does in every group, even the ones we belong to. So the closer you belong to the group, the more you have to give them feedback if you're not happy. I'm very good at that, which sometimes gets me in trouble. I must have learned it from Murray Rothbard. Chuck McLawn, the 4 people that she get to agree with her. Hey, I should have pulled out those pink slips from all those libertarian decentralists. I really have to, now that we have online surveys, I can do one again. Good idea. Thanks Chuck, for that idea. Just to make the point, for non-believers. Hey, it's 10 o'clock in the morning on Saturday. What do you want? Okay. Let's see. Chuck and Dale are going at it here. Ultimate conceit. Oh, now this is interesting. Some single mind will have the knowledge necessary to create a functioning society. Well, I think I've made it clear that, a diversity of communities. That it's an experiment. That networks and confederations, we'll have to see how that works. That some of them may decide to be in current state geographical whatever. But it's an experiment. We're going to have to see what works. I do think that the nation state will fall apart. I mean, even when you have somebody like Ron Paul say is not against secession, and people are going to want to secede. Like, to me, I do really see the biggest problem to be the state secessionists, and we have to really work on them so that they will be accepting of community secession, accepting of the fact that California may want to divide into 6 states, New York may want to go into 4 or 5 states, Texas 3 or 4 of them. Why do you think things like political action are effective as an anarchist? Yeah, well, sometimes I say I'm an anarchist. I'm really an anarchist to the extent that I accept that anarchism may work. And I might want to live in an anarchist community. And then, of course, there's a question, if you have a voluntary community that has a lot of rules, is this still anarchist? So there's really a sliding scale between what is anarchist and what is statist, you know. I don't know, and I'm not going to put down people for wanting a little bit of government or even a little more government in their own communities. And again, I say, I don't know what kind of community I'd like to live in, because I have to see what works, what I like. What I think I might like, I might not like. Let's see. Well, Chuck, here's my question for you. Would you use military force against nonviolent secessionists, you know, ones who aren't stealing property from the people who don't want to secede? You know, who aren't, you know, bombing things, etc., etc. I have not run into any libertarians that would use military force against secessionists, except in those extreme circumstances when they're being very violent towards others. So, Chuck can answer that question if you'd like to. Thank you, Alex, for being one of the 4. Anarchy is the way all the kids are doing it. Yes, even at 62, I'm young at heart. And I want to live at least 20 more years to see what you guys do, you know, and I'm trying before I get too old to really start getting these ideas out there, because, you know, I remember in the 80s thinking, ha ha ha, someday Murray Rothbard will be dead, and when he was mad at me, you know, we were having a fight, and I said, my ideas, he didn't like the decentralism and the pacifism, you know, and my ideas will triumph. But now, of course, I'm 62, and you've got young people going, ha ha ha, someday Carol Moore's going to be dead, and whatever their ideas are will triumph, so time will tell. Yeah, that's true. But even an anarchist, so-called anarchist community, if it got too many rules, I think would become not an anarchist community anymore, according to some people. Because obviously, some people feel anarchy means absolutely no rules at all, except in your own mind, not harming somebody else in constant communication, what harms in other people, you know. So this is why, I mean, so many people have so many different ideas, and I just gave up in, you know, 79, 80, 81, 82, when I was hanging around with libertarians, minarchists, anarchists, and all these left-wingers I was hanging around with. I just gave up on trying to tell anybody the way it should be, and that's why I became a decentralist. In fact, in 1982, there was a huge anti-nuclear rally in New York, and we started a group, and there was about 40 of us all together, of all the libertarian anarchists, and the libertarian centralists, and the LP people, and the syndicalists, and everything. We called ourselves No Nations, No Nukes. And on YouTube, Carol Moore Songs, I have the song No Nations, No Nukes, which some of us sung. I remember going by the United Nations singing No Nations, No Nukes, you know, strumming my guitar. And I have the song and some of the pictures from the protests we did with the different groups back then. So it is possible for all these different groups to work together. You just have to be tolerant. You just have to keep the fights down. And the most disruptive people say, you know, you go off in your group, please, we're trying to get something organized here. We don't need a lot of fights. Kids forever have been anti-establishment. They grow up to be statists. Well, I was more statist when I was young. Let's see. When I was 16 years old, in 1964, I read Ayn Rand. I went to see the Beatles. And I also had an experience in the springtime of, you know, the oneness of all life, you know, a cosmic experience. And between the three, that was the end of the Catholic Church. I did eventually, over time, going to college, become sort of a liberal statist, but I was also into Paul Goodman. But it really, you know, I was sort of a confused hippie until 1979. 3 Mile Island got me active. I went to the Libertarian Party, I went to all these peace groups, anti-nuclear groups, and that's when I really became active. Before that, I was a songwriter and playwright and all that other thing, and doing some producing at a very amateur level, unfortunately, so whatever. Where are we? Minerva. Minerva sounds familiar. I think that's one of the many experiments going on. And you know, there's so many things going on, and I don't even, like, secession.net doesn't even link to a lot of the sites that link to a lot of the really good things going on, so I've got a lot of work to do to update it, and really to get connected. But this is the great thing about George doing this, thank you, George, is that it gets us active. Let me write that down. Thank you, George, for getting us active, for making me update my website. There we go. Okay, let's see, where are we? Exactly, it's time. I've taken a rest the last 3 years. I got fed up with the peace movement in 2007. The Libertarian Party in D.C. hasn't done anything since 2002. So I'd like to move somewhere where the Libertarians are more active, because you just get a lot of people running through, and they very often are employed and a little too conservative. Let's see. Yes, it has to be persistent, because the centralizing forces, the apparatchiks, I have another song I haven't put up, the apparatchiks are everywhere. They are. Their main goal, this was in the speech, and I think I failed to say it, but these people have only one goal, and that's increasing their power, their perks, their paychecks, their pensions. And they overlook all ideology, and they work together beautifully, because that's all they're interested in. And these are the people we have to constantly look out for. I mean, they're in every type of group. They're in libertarian groups, peace groups. They're probably in anarchist groups, decentralist groups. You have to watch out for them all the time. Yep. So anyway, I agree with you there, Rob. So what else? Activism can be fun. Getting in rooms with people and discussing things can be fun. I haven't done it really the last 3 years. Like I said, I got fed up. The peace group, when it was really big, you know, in 2003, 2004, 2005, it had a diversity of people and even a few libertarians. But towards the end, as it got smaller, it was basically two factions, neither of which liked me, and so it drove me out. You know, neither of them like libertarians too much, so but that's all right, because I was pretty fed up with the whole thing at that point anyway. But I had a lot of fun, and if you go to some of my websites, StopTheWarNow.net, go to carolmoore.net, you'll see a lot of protests, the photos I took. You know, it's fun going to protests. Going to meetings, meetings are fun too, all the little dramas you get into, and I mean, it's fun going to these meetings and passing out your literature, and, you know, the controlling left-wingers, you know, they're going, oh, that Carol Moore, she's passing out that stuff and people like it. So that's a lot of fun too. So it's fun, and that happens, you know, you go to libertarian events and you pass out your stuff about how Wayne Root has to get more libertarian. You know, I wish we had some events so I could do that. Alright, we're getting down to the end here. Any final words? Okay. Check out Carol Moore.net. That'll take you to a lot of interesting places. Secession.net, I'm going to keep working on. You know, my blog at... I have two Facebook secession pages. One is a community page, and one is for secession.net. Right now, I can't get the pictures to get up. You know, Facebook is hard. I have a lot of problems with it. But I really would like to get a group of people together, 5 or 6, preferably at least 2 of them are in the neighborhood I live. I'd like to move out to Virginia. I'd like to get a little commune in Virginia. And, you know, get something going. So, especially with some of you young tech people. So anyway, what should I do? George, should I sign out? Yeah, I think I will sign out to give the next person a chance.